Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians, as well as the latest episode of The 100. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I included time slots of when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of The Magicians, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The 100. But first of all, we're going to talk about The Magicians. So for one thing, obviously one side of the story in this episode is about Elliot's whole situation, still trying to work towards being a better king. In this episode, he ends up finding out that Finn is pregnant. Apparently, Fillory has a rabbit that basically is like, pregnant. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Which Elliot's not all that psyched about, which even Finn asked him, I was like, what's wrong? And he's like, well, basically, he's kind of got dad issues, and it's like his dad wasn't the best example of a good father. I'm sure he'll probably elaborate on that more in the future. So it's more like he doesn't know. Obviously, because Elliot's like, oh, my whole life's in front of me. That kind of all went out the window when he got forced to become king. It's like I said, because at that time, it got brought up last episode. He went to Fillory thinking he was going to die. He wanted to die. He just wanted to go to Fillory as an excuse because, probably couldn't bring himself to kill himself. So he just kind of wanted to, he went there with the saying like, oh, I'm going to help them fight the beast and save Fillory type of thing. It's like, no, he just wanted an excuse to die, more so than anything. If he went out in a blaze of glory doing something, that's fine. But the ultimate goal was to die. But now he kind of has to live and everything. And now he has to be more of an adult too, because now he has to rule kingdom of magic. Especially a kingdom where magic is dying, which I'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But the fact is, now he has to deal with the fact is, hey, I have a child that's on the way. And that complicates things even more. And then on top of that, there was a guy, Baylor, who tried to kill him. It turns out that this guy is I love it, Foo Fighter. Margot kept literally making fun of it. Essentially, they're a group of people who believe in not having Earthlings be rulers, royalty in Fillory, that Fillory should be ruled by someone, in fact, from Fillory. Which you had everyone being like, yeah, you should torture him. Basically, one was put him on a bed of 1,000 needles or something like that. Then you had, I forgot what the other ones were. One was by the sloth, which, Margot commented on, was like, man, that sloth is either says sociopath or psychopath. Because basically it's like, okay, we tie him up to multiple centaurs who will go off in different direction, and while he's being stretched, spike him at the same time or something like that. It's like, that's, some hardcore punishment, which Elliot isn't all for. It's like, really? Do we really need to kill him and everything? No, that's what the other one was. It was like strangle him, because it's like he tried to strangle Elliot. So it's like, poetic justice, I guess, would be kind of the word in that particular case, which you can automatically see the look on Finn's face. I was like, why is that? Because obviously you also had a comment of like, oh, he's nothing but a commoner. It's like, okay, so even in Fillory, obviously in Fillory, there's a whole social status aspect, which they haven't delved into, Fillory, it was brought up. Fillory might seem like, oh, it's such a wonderful place, especially when it came to Quentin, because it's like, oh, I read about it in the books. Obviously, the books are a heavily diluted version. It's just like the Grimm tales. It's like, oh, obviously, you have the more cute versions of them, like Little Red Riding Hood. There's a much cuter version of it that has a happy ending. But obviously, when you go to the original Grimm tales, it's like, oh, it's not like that. They are very bad endings in most occasions. So it's kind of the similar circumstance. Which you have Elliot being actually going to Baylor and asking him hey, what would you do if you were in my shoes? So actually taking his advice, because obviously, he knows a little bit more about running Fillory. He even goes out as far as saying him and his people will work to make sure that all humans who are connected to Fillory kill them all, because it's like they don't want any more humans coming here to rule over the kingdom. It's like we have to be. But it's like, if that's the case, why is that whole situation set in place anyway? Maybe it's something that Chatwin's put in place. The whole situation of having a king from Earth. Why would that be a thing then? They're only going along with the guidelines that are already set. So it's like, if you want a king from Earth, why is that such a thing already set in stone? But nevertheless, we end up finding out, Elliot is taking this a little more serious. He's like, we're not going to kill him, which Margot's like, wait, what? Because Margot's kind of like, let's not fiddle with things. Just kind of work with the system that's already there. We got to be responsible. This is how things have always been. So we got to work towards that. But, Elliot trying to be more of an adult. He's like, I'm a dad now too. So I got to kind of set a better example. So it's like, we're not going to kill him. The fact is, before we get to points like that, we're going to have to talk to people, lock him up, sure, because he tried to kill me, but don't execute him like that. So, like I said, it's interesting seeing like Elliot kind of stepping up, trying to be a more responsible person. But then we end up finding out the reason why Fen had that look on her face. Because I thought at first, I was like, oh yeah, because he's a commoner and she herself is a commoner, so she doesn't like hearing those terms. It turns out that she herself was at one point in time a Foo Fighter. Actually, her and Baylor, I assume, have a past, just the way they're so familiar with each other. It's like, oh, like, I thought you were just here to be my smile. She's like, no, that's my husband, and he's also the father of my child, so she's not going to turn on him. But Baylor's like, hey, you don't work for us, and the Foo Fighters like basically spy on him and give us information. I'll tell him the truth. And she's like, well, I'll tell him myself. It's like, sure, you're king who is highly emotional and does not like, being told bad news. So it seems like she is going to keep quiet about that. But she's like, if you were the Foo Fighters do anything, I'm going to kill you. So it's interesting. I was wondering what they were going to do with Finn's character, because it seemed like she was just kind of like the background wife, just like, so like, oh, I'll do whatever you say, just kind of like, I don't know, I wasn't really sure what they were going to do with her character, but it's like they are making her character very interesting now. Because it seemed like she was very two-dimensional. It's like they didn't really know what they were going to do with her, but now it's like, oh no, there's a lot more depth to her than we knew. I mean, it makes you wonder, like, because she left the Foo Fighters, but I know, it's weird saying it. Every time I say it, I have to pause a little bit. I was like, yeah, because that's really what they're called. It makes you wonder, because she left them, so it's like, was she ever planning on marrying, whoever the next high ruling king would be for the purposes of the Foo Fighters? Like, did that even cross her mind when she married Elliot, even though she knew that's kind of how things were supposed to work out, or what? It's kind of interesting that even though she is kind of the queen, even Margot has a little more authority to her, but granted, even Margot doesn't have much authority because the council people are like, yeah, truth be told, is the High Queen, you can bring up your complaints about something, but it's like, honestly, Elliot basically has the final say on it. So it's definitely going to be interesting going forward with there. On the other side of things, we had Penny not being able to do magic because his hands aren't actually technically his. They're kind of brand new hands. I guess it's kind of a system of like, it's kind of a weird thing where it's like, these aren't your original appendages. Like, these aren't your original hands. So it's like, those hands grew up with you. They were a part of you. And these are new hands that are not necessarily a part of you. They kind of grew from you. It's weird. But basically, Henry sends him off. He's like, yeah, the only person that can probably help you is Malakovsky. It's like, oh, I have to go back to that dick again. Which he kind of has Penny doing this whole, like, almost, and even, I was like, he's like, oh, I want you to untie all these knots, and he's like, okay. I was like, and then he's like, okay, I want you to saw down, using this filer, I want you to saw down this table into sawdust. I'm like, is this some, like, Karate Kid Mr. Miyagi shit? And then he's like, okay, I cut it out with this Karate Kid shit. I was like, right! That seemed like some wax on, wax off type of thing. Which, it seems like, obviously, Malakovsky's got, like, a bigger plan, because obviously he sees the fluctuations in magic and things. Like, basically, he's giving Penny an out. He's like, the fact of the matter is, you can't really use magic anymore. It's like, your hands are kind of useless for now until Malakovsky gives him an option to kind of help. But it's like, no, like, get out while you can. Like, enjoy the couple of years you have left. Because after this, magic is dying out. It's like, mainly because of the whole wellspring situation. They're trying to fix it, but it's like, in a matter of years, magic will go possibly kaput. It's already been on the fritz going forward, but he's kind of actually getting prepared. Like, it's very interesting, like, he's saying that basically dark days are coming. Like, obviously magic won't be a thing anymore, but it's like, I guess, they haven't really brought it up too much, but I guess magic has such a huge influence in the world. Like, a lot of stuff probably goes by a lot better because of magic. I mean, granted, magic disappearing not only means stuff here on Earth, and that means magicians lose their magic. But like I said, like, the point I was trying to make is maybe there are people in high positions who are magicians, and they do a lot of stuff that helps the world go around. Or, also Fillory will be dying, as well as any other world connected to magic, because Fillory's kind of the centerfold of magic for everyone, so... But he's apparently building some kind of devices to basically store magic. So everything that basically Penny's been doing this entire episode deals with that. And we also ended up learning, Penny ended up learning like why Mayakovsky, I know I'm like literally struggling with his name. Mayakovsky is like there in the first place. Turns out, obviously because she pops up in this episode, is Emily, the whole like teacher she was having an affair with situation, and she wanted to make herself more beautiful. Apparently it was Mayakovsky that was the teacher, because apparently he was sleeping with all his students until he, in his words, slept with the wrong one, because there were huge ramifications because she did what she did. It led to Charlie turning Niffin and dying. So that's why he kind of got locked up here, because it's like, hey, either spend the rest of my life here, I mean, at the very least, until they probably deem him otherwise, forgiven, I guess. But either that or give up magic. So it's like he's telling Penny to give up magic, but it's like when he was given the option, he didn't give up his magic. Granted, at that time, I was like, well, magic's still a thing. At least in Penny's case, it's like, give up magic now because magic might not be a thing soon enough going forward. So it seems like it's all about, them working together to get that situated, and also about trying to get Penny to hands to work again. Apparently Penny needs to go to Fillory and get some kind of moss or something, like I said, connected to this. Or maybe there's some secret plan to help, like I said, once that like Mr. Miyagi stuff of like, hey, actually there is some wax on, wax off situation here where you actually are helping learn to get control of your hands. So and then another side of the story, since I brought her up before, is Emily. Quentin's basically back in the real world. He kind of left the whole magic thing behind. He's not at break bills. He hasn't dealt with anything magic related. He's basically working a regular, boring job. And he ends up working at the same place Emily is working, which I don't think that's a coincidence. I think legitimately that whole situation is kind of like Henry's like basically like, hey, I can't force you to do what you don't want to do. Basically here, basically it's kind of a mind game type of situation. Maybe it isn't. Maybe Henry's just like, yeah, do whatever the hell you want to. I don't care. I'm not going to force you to stay here. If you want to kind of be part of the real world, here's a place, where magicians who might not really have a 100% skill set or really, find some place in the world to have a job and just have a normal life, essentially, hence where Emily works and everything. So, but there might be some underlining thing where Henry's like, yeah, I'm sending you here to, so they could talk with Emily because, because it's like, I think it's too much of a coincidence that she works there, but maybe that's where they send, maybe Emily and Q are kind of some of the few people, because some people, when they kind of got brought up, I think last season, and when some people leave break bills, they use their magic, other people don't. They just like, they take what they've learned, and obviously Bobby used magic on a day-to-day basis, but they don't use it in some big, grand, influential type of way. So, I don't know. But basically, Emily, obviously she has her reservations about magic because of everything that happened. So she kind of got upset at Quentin anytime he would use magic. But they, got, together and got super drunk and high, which I love that constant thing, because it was like that coworker of Quentin's that he just kind of indifferent towards. The fact is, he's like, oh, were you about to like break in your office and everything? Like, were you about to jerk it? He's like, no, I wasn't. He's like, hey, it's okay. I know better than anyone. I've got a wife and kids at home. It's like, no privacy. He's like, no, I wasn't. And then literally like a minute later, Emily walks in. He's like, oh, what were you doing? Masturbating? He's like, what kind of place is this at? Everyone's just walking in my office and assuming I'm masturbating just because I want you to knock before you enter. It's just, that's just common courtesy. But I love the fact is that Quentin's like, I'm not masturbating here. But, what I thought was kind of interesting was the whole situation, because they're basically both in a situation where they're dealing with the grief. At first, I was wondering, it's like, oh, does Quentin not know who she is? It's like, no, he knows exactly who she is. It's like, Alice told me about everything. And she's like, oh, how is Alice? Alice is dead. And it's just like, like I said, sitting there kind of getting high, because it's like they had the whole conversation like magic, oh, it's wonderful and everything, but then magic is just a problem within itself. There's like a constant spiral, because you do this one thing of magic to fix a problem, but that magic itself creates a problem, which that magic creates a problem, just an endless cycle of just like magic has a way of fucking up your life essentially. So hence like why she doesn't do or practice magic anymore. But her and Quentin kind of got drunk and everything. She's like, oh, let's do a spell. And basically she does an illusion spell that makes him look like Mayakovsky, and it makes her look like Alice, which they end up, afterwards he's like, oh, I miss you, and they start making out and end up having sex, which afterwards Quentin's just kind of like I got to get out of here type of situation, which she's like, oh, we could keep doing that again. And she's like, oh, is that it? Because Quentin wants to just up and leave. I was thinking like, we're going to end up in a situation where it turns out like Emily goes a little batshit crazy and starts attacking him or something, or try to screw him over. I thought that was going to happen, but she didn't. Just because the fact is Maya Koski is like, oh, I slept with the wrong girl. It's like, well, I guess he was talking about the fact is that he was slept with a girl who was very insecure, essentially, I guess is what he was alluding to, because the whole, like, doing what she did to herself, and just things, like I said, things playing out the way they did with Charlie. But, the fact of the matter is, he probably, like, I doubt the conversation came up exactly how Alice died. The fact is that she died in very similar circumstances to her brother going niffin. But, for Quentin, it's like, yeah, doing what they did, it felt good because it was like, oh, it was with Alice again and everything, and it, it's exactly what I needed. But it actually made him feel worse because it was a reminder to him. It's like, oh, like, because when it was all said and done, it's like it's a reminder that Alice is gone, and now he also knows there's no way to get her back. Even with magic, he can't get her back. That's why he quit doing magic in the first place. That's why he just wanted to go to regular, boring life, because it's like, magic is fine and everything, and he might dabble with it a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, it doesn't solve any problems. Like, everything is still shitty, Life is still shitty, so. And then basically, he just feels terrible. Like I said, just a constant reminder, like, that she is gone now, and it cements it in his head, and it just makes it even more real. And he's telling Emily, he's like, I'm sorry for everything you've lost. Basically, see you at work. So I'm very curious to see where that goes, like, will that continue to be? I was thinking they were going to sleep together, but I figured there'd be a situation where he'd regret it afterwards, just because of, like, maybe for him. I mean, he obviously did, but for different reasons. I mean, obviously because he slept with someone else, but also because he slept with someone and then she looked like Alice, and so it's like, it's almost like, yeah, it's nice in the moment because like, oh, Alice is here, but like I said, yeah, reality sinks in. But at the very end of the episode, we see him seeing Alice, who's far away, being like, help me. And she quickly disappears. And so it's like I brought it up last episode. Someone told me about the whole underworld situation. So I'm wondering, is that where we're going? Because, or whether that's just all in Quentin's head. Maybe it's a little spark of the Niffin left that's following him around or something. Kind of like the Charlie situation, but maybe it's playing to be Alice, or maybe actually is Alice. I mean, there's so many levels that could be. Because what was brought up this episode, I saw a little peek of it. I mean, I can assume, because there was like a whole thing being held for Alice, being dead and everything. He ended up contacting her parents, which we met them last season. They had their relationship. I'm very curious to know how the relationship was working out now, because what was his name? Because I ended up finding this out because I went back and because I would rewatch season 1 before season 2 came out. And the actor who plays Axel on Van Helsing, he was the like third, I forgot his name, but he was that partner that apparently he was a traveler that ended up killing himself. That was kind of the third party in their relationship. I wonder, did they replace him or not? That'll probably be something that will come up. But I'm very curious to see how that all plays out, dude. That's very interesting. And the final note I want to bring up in this episode is the whole Julia situation, which I forget, like, oh yeah, this show is funny and just crazy in some parts, but it's also dark and deals with some pretty serious shit too. Because Julia ends up finding out in this episode, it's like, oh, I'm pregnant. And now the question is like, is it Richard's baby or is it Reynard's baby? Because there is a very big distinction there, because it's like, she ends up going and gets a checkup and she's like, no, I need to get an abortion, because it's like a constant reminder of what she went through. Even find out that Katie actually had one back in the day too. So it's like I kind of give Julia a lot of grief. It's one of those things. I'll admit it. I've been hard on her this season, just after everything. It's just because it's like, she's been in a lot of pain and it sucks, and it's just like she's doing whatever she can to try and remedy that situation. Like, she's just trying to get rid of Reynard and trying to move past all this, and which won't be an easy thing. But the fact of the matter is, at the very least, she's not going through this alone. She does have Katie. At least she has someone, because things could be a lot worse, not just for her, but just everything in general if she was handling this by herself. I mean, there's no telling what could go down if she handled it by herself. But she ends up going to her doctor, and her doctor's about to perform the abortion, but then her hands start getting weird. She ends up stabbing herself in the eye. And on top of that, there was the assistant, like the, because I get the feeling like the word secretary is very demeaning. So I don't know what to kind of refer to her as. The desk lady who was like, oh yeah, oh, you have an appointment, Julia? And it's like, oh yeah, delete her appointment. It's like, wait, what? At first, I'm like, oh, is this Reynard doing it? I was like, did he know about her being pregnant? It's like, is he doing all this just to be an asshole? But it's like, no, I'm cussing a lot in this. like I said, I get too comfortable around things. When I know things cuss a lot, which the show does, but granted, it's censored and everything, I feel, I don't know, I go a little crazy sometimes. I need to cut that back a little bit. I think I literally brought that up in last week's episode too. Then I really do need to work on my filthy mouth. I just get a little too relaxed. Like, more often than not, I don't go to that extreme. Like, I will drop a couple cuss words. I know, nevertheless. But it turns out, okay, so the one behind all that is her baby because it's trying not to be born. Because there's a whole spell situation where it's like, there are spell equivalents, but they're like some old school stuff that obviously modern medicine can basically help that situation. Because basically it would destroy her uterus and stuff like that and trying to get rid of this baby. But also, as we can see, this baby isn't normal. Which you kind of had the feeling, obviously, it wasn't going to be. It does make you wonder, like, because Reynard doesn't know about it, but what will that mean going forward? Because the fact is, he took an interest in Julia. He could have killed her, but he didn't. Even after he got what he wanted, he left her alive. So maybe he knows that she got knocked up. Maybe that's kind of the whole point, you know? I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. Like I said, the series, I forget that it does have I mean, just her whole storyline, just like, dude, that's fucking dark. And it's like, I mean, it's a serious situation. That's what kind of throws you off because it's such a weird and quirky show that has a dark sense of humor, but at the same time, it's just outright just dark. So, I don't know. I'm very curious to see how that all turns out, like what it means going forward, because it's like she wants to get rid of this baby, and I'm afraid that means she will go to drastic measures to deal with it. But it's like, as we can tell, this baby isn't normal. It is the baby of Reynard is a god, so I guess whatever is inside of her is kind of a demigod, I would assume. I mean, the fact is, because Julia isn't a normal person either. She's a magician, so it's like, what does that mean? I mean, there's ways you could think about this, like, going forward. Like, obviously, she could use the baby as a way. I mean, whatever way it is to get rid of Reynard, it's like, obviously, she has a way to bait him. It's like, yo, Reynard, your baby. It's like, wait, I'm gonna be a daddy. That could obviously be what she could use to lure him in to kind of. I mean, they still need to find out who it was that sent him away like 40 years ago and how they went about doing it. So it takes a lot of magic, and it's like, who's to say? I mean, with all magic, you know, there comes a price, especially the bigger and more powerful it is. You know, Allison, to take down the beast calls, you know, the way to go about that was becoming a Niffin. So, you know, see what I mean? So, what kind of price will she have to pay to get rid of Reynard? And will it be, I mean, in her state of mind, it's like, no price is too much. So, very good episode. Very interested to see where everything goes forward from here. And now moving on to this week's episode of The 100. So it finally came out. I knew it was only a matter of time. Was not expecting it to be this fast, but the list came out. Originally, it was Jasper and Monty who came across the list. Obviously, Jasper knew nothing about it. Obviously, Monty's in the know about the whole situation about like only being able to hold 100 people. Granted, he didn't know about the whole list situation. Neither did he know that he wouldn't be on the list. Which later he explains to Clarke. He's like, you know what? I understand from a pragmatic standpoint. It's like, I understand I'm not that good as an engineer. I'm obviously like kind of low leveled when it comes to engineers. So obviously you want other people before me. But really what comes down to it is like, you shouldn't really do this. You shouldn't try to decide everyone's fate. That basically you shouldn't, you know, deciding who gets to live and who gets to die. Because, you know, like Jasper said, you're not God. I mean, going as far as she did, she zapped Jasper and she locked him up because, you know, like I said, brought from the very beginning, it's a hard decision, like, to be in Clarke's shoes. The fact of the matter is, like, she's a leader and she has to make these tough choices. And, like, she even brings it up when she's talking to Jasper. Like, she hated everything that Jaha was and everything he represented. But in the long run, it's like, he's the reason why they're able to stay together. Even though you don't 100% agree with the way he handled things, he did his best. He was the leader and he had to make hard choices because that's the choices that a leader is presented before him. Though Jasper did bring up something, he's like, the reason why it kind of worked out like this is because you only gave yourself this choice. You didn't really, you know, she's obviously, the fact is, if she was wholeheartedly believing in this plan, she wouldn't have come up with the list in the first place. But it's like, yeah, like, it's something that Jaha brings up. The fact is, it's about being pragmatic. The list is very pragmatic. But what it comes down to, because Monty ends up bringing up the list, because it's also about Harper not being up there, because Like, but the thing is, it wasn't like she just picked random people. Like, she did her research. Like, she even brings up the reason why she wouldn't put Harper on the list, because it's like some of the list is more women than males, because they need women to repopulate, essentially. So, you know, women can have babies. And then even one of the dudes is like, really? That's messed up. Even, if he wanted to, if he could, he would have been like, you know how super sexist that is? It's just because I can't give birth to a baby, I can't live. But it's like, with Harper's case, it's like the fact that she looked into her medical file, her dad had a sickness, and it's like, oh, she might have it too. So it's like she could be a drain on the resources. Is that words Clarke used? So, like I said, like, it's not Clarke, like Clarke took time and like she legitimately thought about it. It's like, oh, we put some doctors, some engineers, people that would help keep everyone else alive. It's not, she didn't get emotional with it. Like, 'cause she didn't even put her own name on the list. That was Bellamy, but she put Bellamy there because it's like, because legitimately, even Jaha kind of puts up defense too, being like, Bellamy and Clarke deserve to be on the list. They're the leaders. Because let's not forget who got most of you this far: Bellamy and Clarke. Like, obviously, like I brought it up before, like, Bellamy was kind of a hothead in the beginning, but still he led them to where they are now, with Clarke. So it's like, they've made it this far because of them. So it's like, you might as well take your leaders, but then you could also play devil's advocate, being like, well, captains should go down with the ship. So, like, they're the leaders and everything, so they should save those spots for other qualified people. So, but, like I said, because Jaha puts it in an interesting way, and I never really thought about it. Because to me, I was 100% on Clarke's side. Like, I get it's a tough choice, but the fact of the matter is, she did so. Because the whole point of that list was if it worst comes to worst. It was an if maybe. But even, for people, they didn't hear the if maybe, because it's like, to them, like, the situation is super dire. So it's like, there's too much high of a percentage for that to be a thing. Like, so it kind of put that in perspective for everyone, and it also brought up a thing, because Monty wanted to be like, oh, it didn't hurt him, because I brought up earlier, he's like, oh yeah, he understands, he even agree with it, but it's the fact that she lied about it. That's a big problem people have with it, but also is because the fact is that the way Clarke was phrasing it, she didn't mean it to sound this way, but Jaha puts it, and I find it very interesting, is that people, when they hear her talking about the fact is that, oh, it's because of this, and that you're not on the list, and this, and that, and puts this other person on the list, even though it's like, you and the same person might be engineers, but it's like, Jaha, for example, is a very good engineer, so, like, he kind of understands the arc, he knows it a lot better, so he's a top-class engineer, so why he would replace someone like Monty on the list, and it's, but those words, rather, people hear it a different way, because Clarke is like, oh, these people are qualified. What they hear it as is like, oh, you're saying we're worthless, that we don't have much merit. So to kind of keep the peace, Jaha is like, okay, what we're going to do is everyone's going to work going forward. And what we're going to do is have a lottery. It's going to be 100% of the chance. You put in the time and the work, and basically you get to decide who gets to go on the ship. Obviously, Clarke's like, you can't really expect to do this, because what if, with this random draw, like, we don't get the people we need, like doctors and stuff like that. But for Jaha, it's like, we need to keep people's spirits up, prove to them that they have work. If they feel like, oh, like, they're going to be working super hard to prove, like, hey, I deserve to be one of those 100 people that survive. But, it's almost like kind of in a weird way giving them inspiration. It's because it's like, the thing is, like I said, I agree with the way everyone else kind of goes about it. Like, Clarke should have told him from the beginning. Raven was right. The fact is, you should have told him from the beginning, because even Monty was like, people will surprise you. Granted, if Jaha had interfered, what would really have gone down, Monty? You would have, like, made things worse, actually. I legitimately think if Monty had, like, if Jaha hadn't interfered, things would have been a lot worse. Because, obviously, like I said, with what Clarke was saying, all that was doing is making people think, oh, I'm worthless. No, I'm not worthless. I can prove to be useful. It's like, oh, blah, 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 so obviously, Monty had good intention behind it, but at the same time, I do think that he can't deny that there was a part of him that was mad that him or even Harper wasn't on the list. Because even if Harper was on the list, I do wonder if he would look at the list differently, I think he does think he was hurt that he wasn't on the list. It's like, we've been through so much and you wouldn't save me. At the very least, you wouldn't even save Harper. It's like, but at the same time, it's like, if you and Harper weren't in a relationship, would you, like, like I said, it's very detached to think of it like that, because you're trying to think of it from a very realistic point of view. Is why she wrote the list. Like, it was not an easy decision. She really thought about it. She didn't just pick, like, emotional, because if she did, she would have picked all the first people on the list. Because even look at Bellamy. Bellamy was 99 on the list. If she was looking emotionally, she would have put him at the top of the list with you and everyone else, everyone that she's been through all this with. Like, but that's not the case. So, obviously everyone's working together for this lottery that's kind of been set in place, and it's definitely going to be interesting going forward. I'm very interested about Jasper because I'm kind of having a slight turn on him. Obviously he has that douchebag moment where he's like, pretending the rain is poison, and he's like, I'm just messing with you, like your jokes suck. He's like, come on, when everyone loses their sense of humor. Like even at that moment he kind of floated Jaha. So it was kind of like a funny moment, kind of getting everyone relaxed. And, you know, even when it was all said and done, like you had that moment, Jasper like kind of turns things around. Even though he's so quick about dying, he was so up and rise because it's like, because for him, it's also the same thing as the Mount Weather situation all over again. It was like, it's Clarke's decision to decide who lives and who dies. So it's like, you're not God, so don't try to make those decisions. Like, you know, at the end of the day, you should let people decide, you know, show for themselves, like whether, you know, put forth the effort to prove that they're, you know, that they can strive to survive. You know, it's hard to really put it in words. Like the show did it a lot more elegantly, and I can't grasp the right words to kind of put it, but it's just, it was so well put, you know? And, it's just like, just the way Jasper's attitude about like, you know, basically saying like, you know, one day, Clarke, you're going to look back on this and think that was kind of funny, which it's like, even though he's very all about dying, he's very optimistic. Like he said, like he is like, yeah, just because I've submitted myself to die doesn't mean I want the rest of you to die. So it's like, it's so interesting. Like, I think that's so fascinating because I thought from the very beginning, it seemed like he was like, yeah, we're all going to die, just accept it. But it's like, no, he's okay with them trying. He's not going to interfere with them trying, which I thought he was legitimately going to do. So like I say, it's making me have a different, I've been like heavy on Jasper because I'm like, screw Jasper, I get everything you've been through, but you're not the only person hurt. You're willing to die. You want to jeopardize everyone else. But it's like, no, he actually hasn't done anything to jeopardize anything. I mean, granted, this might have been a situation, but nevertheless, it's very interesting. Then on the other side of things is the group. You know, Abby's leading a group to go to one of Becca's labs to basically try and re-engineer Luna's blood into a cure for everyone, which Luna is super reluctant about. Nico is like, oh, we got to help them. These are people, I trust them. You know, the fact is that this is all about saving us all, but Luna's like, the fact of the matter is, what if I said no? What would happen there? Would it really be a situation of like, oh, I'm free to do whatever I want to? It's like, no, I'm their prisoner. And it kind of came down to a conversation between her and Raven, because Luna kind of basically gave up faith in people. Because, you know, when you run back into it, like why Luna is where she is right now. Why? Because she was supposed to be the next commander after Lexa, but it's because Luna decided to run away because she didn't want to be part of that world anymore. Being commander, being the leader. Like the fact is there's so much torture and fighting and bloodshed. You know, Lexa eventually wanted to find a different way, but for the longest time, that's how Lexa led. And that's how all previous commanders had led. And Luna didn't want to be that way. That's why she went off and started that, was at that place with all those different people, like-minded people who just want to escape all the bloodshed. And so in her mind, it's like, are we really worth saving? Because it's like, if we if I help save everyone, not even just Tree Crew, not even just Sky Crew, it's just like saving everyone. It's like, are they really worth saving? Are we like beyond being approached? Are we about beyond, you know, can we be forgiven? Because who's to say we won't repeat the same thing? And, you know, it's nature, like, you know, and it's like, even though there's Grounders, there's Sky Crew, there's Ice Nation, like at the end of the day, everyone's, you know, to a certain degree human. I know like there's technicalities and all of that, but it's like, people let stuff get the best of them, their emotions, their need to be better than someone, to overwhelm someone. But there's, you know, where there are those people, you know, Raven also brings up the fact is there are good people too. It's like, you might be pissed at everyone else that basically they'll kind of recycle and repeat what happened in history, kind of the bloodshed and anger and wars and hurt. But it's like, there's also good people too, and you're willing to let them die. Which Raven was able to kind of convince Luna to kind of work with them. Even kind of helping deal with the whole drone situation, which is very interesting. That why is that still active though? I mean, I guess really all that was set up by Rebecca a long time ago, because I was wondering, I was like, oh, is this all, because they were like, I mean, I guess after so much time you would think that they would have fallen apart, not unless there was someone like giving them maintenance. Maybe it was like Allie, maybe some people. I feel like if it was connected to the city of, well, it might have been connected to the city of light, because that might be like maybe Jaha, he is an engineer, so maybe he kept them up to date and stuff, like kept them, because they were running pretty perfectly fine. And so it's like, but they're no threat to you unless you go further beyond the barrier, which Imori brought up something interesting. She was like, the fact is, just trust me, Like, we should just run from this, Murphy. Like, the fact is, there's things out here that are much more dangerous than just drones. Which begs up the question, like, what does she mean by that exactly? Because she and her people like, she calls herself, she's like, I'm a mutant. Like, Allie was like, never cross that because it's not for mutants to go. Could this be where they originated from? Like, her and her people, like, these quote unquote mutants were born from this? I mean, I'm curious. Because it's like, when they enter the lab, you see Mori kind of looking around. Like I said, she's afraid. She's like, there's more out here in this woods than that. So it's like, what kind of other things were they working on or creating there? Because obviously we see, I'm wondering will this kind of dive any more into Rebecca's past. I mean, really, I guess it comes down to whether or not Erica Sarah, the actress who played her and, Allie, who, interestingly enough, because I was recently watching the trailer again because I caught it in front of a YouTube video. The Power Rangers, because it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I think it's the Yellow Ranger, I might be wrong. I think her mom, like the one who's like, oh, pee in a cup, that's Erica Sarah. I didn't notice it until I saw this particular ad that showed her mom's face. I was like, wait, you're in this? I was like, ah! Because like Trip, every time I see her, he's just like, ah. Obviously, like I said, when it comes to Erica Sarah, the first thing that pops in my head is Joe, because that was the first thing I ever saw her in and loved her in. So nevertheless, that was just kind of an interesting thing. I wonder what kind of, because we would come to find out that Rebecca did a lot more than just Allie, that she kind of did other experiments too. I mean, as we know, like her whole situation before coming back to Earth and everything, she kind of, doomed a lot of people just for the sake of her own research and stuff like that. So it's like, it makes you wonder what other shady stuff is going to go down in that lab. Because they brought up a good question. It's like, why are those drones and stuff there to protect stuff? Like, who is that, those security measures meant to keep out? Who would bother coming there, So, a lot of interesting questions on that front, so. Like I said, in this time we do have Luna being a little more willing to help. And also Naiko dying. I mean, that's what kind of set this off for her, kind of going off on her own, but she kind of circled back to kind of get back on a boat. But the interesting thing with Naiko is, like, he was kind of a recurring character that's been a part of the show since the very beginning, because he was pretty tight with Lincoln, wasn't he? Like, he was the one that, I'm pretty sure that's the same character that we see constantly, like, interacting with Lincoln. It's like, dude, they're trying to kill everybody from the, like, earlier parts of the show, aren't they? Like, it's like, crap, dude, the death hasn't stopped, especially with things kind of breaking down the way they did. I'll kind of get to that in a second, but you had the big sit down between Octavia and Kane. Kane is like, yeah, I need you to calm the hell down. You basically been on a killing spree. It's like, she's like, I'm a warrior. It's like, no, a warrior knows when to and when not to kill. And it's like, all you've done is just nonstop killing, with the dude last episode. And apparently, I mean, at least from what I can tell, it seems like he says she killed Ilian too. Like, he's like, oh, you didn't have to cut that boy's head off. So it's like, or is she referencing something else? Was he referencing something else? But he definitely brought up Pike. It's like, Pike should have been brought to justice. Yeah, he did a lot of bad stuff. But more so because, it's like the difference between being kind of going forward and fighting for the sake of others and just straight up revenge. It's like she's been on the path of revenge since the very beginning. Like, ever since Lincoln died, like, it broke something inside of her. I mean, remember, she isn't known as a Sky Ripper for nothing. Because like I said, I brought it up last episode, when you look at Indra, like, even she kind of looked concerned, because I think she sees the same thing that Kane sees. It's like, yeah, I get it, because basically, he's like, yeah, I get it, you didn't want to kill Gaia and everything last episode, but basically your actions have consequences. I want you not to kill anyone. But in this episode, Rowan meets with Kane. Basically, he captured Bellamy and someone else from Arcadia. Basically, this person from Arcadia basically spilled all the beans about the Ark, the 100 people that could be up there, like, protecting from the radiation, kind of giving part of the plan. And basically, you have Kane explaining the rest of it, being like, hey, the fact of the matter is, yes, that's kind of a last minute resort in this whole circumstance, and then basically being like, okay, the other side of our real plan is Nightblood. Luna once we inject Nightblood into everyone, we can possibly find a cure, which echoes like, oh, that's blasphemy. It's like, why would we want to put Nightblood in us? We're part of Ice Nation, type of situation. Why, I guess it's kind of looked as dirtying their blood. It's like, why mix our blood with such dirty, filthy blood? And, it's like, oh, it's all lies. Which Rowan has basically had enough. Because for him, it's like, if you really had pure intentions, you you would have came to me about this whole plan from the very beginning. But the fact is you were so hush-hush secret about it. Killed one of the other dude. I mean, because the other person that was captured was Bellamy. And they're like, okay. Basically using them in hostage. And in that moment, the alliance was broken. As they're basically like, hey, we're waging war against not only Tree Crew, but also Sky Crew. So Ice Nation is just going back to... I mean, you see the look on Rowan's face, like he doesn't necessarily want to do it, but he has no choice. It's like, I guess, because he feels like they've put him in a corner where he has no choice but to do this. I mean, he is also under the impression that the Flame is not around anymore, because he also brought up, he's like, if the fact is I didn't know that the Flame was destroyed, I would think that you were trying to basically get Luna to replace me as commander, essentially trying to get her to rise to commander, which is like, that's like the last thing on her mind. They're worried about trying to survive for now. But then, I'm guessing because there was kind of upheaval, probably because about the Flame kind of being lost, the rumor might have spread and it kind of sparked some stuff. So maybe that's why he's also pushing for this. I mean, more so than anything, finding out that they've had this last resort. I mean, that's actually what he's planning to do. Basically go to Arcadia and all of them kind of take over. But, like basically ensure him and his people are there to survive, you know? It's like, I mean, but the fact of the matter is what you want to do is make sure, I mean, at the very least, you want to make sure they're finished completing it first before you go invading it. Which Octavia, you know, ended up hearing that basically Indra's fine. She went off and warned the others of Tree Crew about, you know, the alliance breaking down. And she would try to go back and warn them, but Echo and some others followed her, and it kind of ended in a battle. Because originally Octavia was supposed to be brought back because Rowan, I think, has taken an interest in her because it's like, oh, he could use a warrior like her. Obviously, Kane and Bellamy are mainly hostages, but I think Octavia was also supposed to be one too, but I think it was probably more so he was going to try and convince her to be his warrior, kind of like he was kind of convincing her last episode. But it ended with Echo stabbing her and her falling off the cliff, which at that moment I already figured she wasn't dead. Last bit of the episode proves that she's not dead, but I kind of figured that was going to be the case. But you saw that moment where Echo was kind of like, oh crap, because she was ordered not to kill her. I mean, for two things. One, I think it's because Rowan was like, yeah, bring her back alive. So it's like she failed her king. She was supposed to do one simple mission, bring her back, but Octavia didn't make it easy. But I think it's also because of Bellamy, because then like she turned to Bellamy and when she's saying it, she actually is sad because, you know, like I said, like even though they're at their differences now, like Bellamy's the one that kind of helped her escape from Mount Weather, but she was also the one that betrayed them and led them into a trap that ended up getting her people killed because it was all part of the Ice Queen's plan and everything, kind of to spark things up. Because she's the one that kind of she basically put Bellamy in a situation to basically kill, work with Pike and essentially stuff like that, so. And you see Bellamy devastated because, to his knowledge, you know, Octavia's dead. Octavia's the last family he has left. Even though they're at odds and everything, she's still all he has left. And to me, you don't realize how much you messed up because it's like, we saw what Bellamy did in last season when he lost not just a lot of people, but also someone else he cared about during that whole situation that Echo set up. It's like now in his mind, Echo has taken even more from him because like that whole situation happened because of Echo. Who cares if you're following orders? You still went through it. We were allies and you betrayed me. I put my trust in you when other people weren't willing to. And I did because it's like, oh, we helped each other out and you betrayed me. And now on top of this, I find out like, my sister is dead, and it's also because of you. It's like I said, we seen what Bellamy did last time when something like that happens. Like, what's he going to do now? You don't think about the fact is what he might do now that his sister is gone. Like, Bellamy won't care anymore. As long as he'll take her down or even Rowan down, he'll kill them if he gets the opportunity to, just because of that. So, but like I said, she is alive. She got on her horse, and she's heading to Arcadia. Very good episode. I'm very interested to see how it all plays out, where it goes from here. Everyone, like, will she get there in time to warn them about Rowan and what that means going forward? Like, you know, Clarke's going to try and keep some form of peace, but it's like the alliance is broken down. He's already started it. I don't think there's any going back for Rowan, because if he goes back, like, all his people are going to look at him as weak, especially someone like Echo, but, you know, any other ambassadors will look at him as weak. It's like, okay, you made this decision, so don't back down. I mean, out of a sense of pride, he might not do it anyway, so it's like, the whole point of this is to make sure everyone survives. Ice Nation, Sky Crew, Tree Crew, doesn't matter. Like, everyone's supposed to survive, but it's going to be interesting seeing where we go forward with this. Like I said, with everyone, I mean, it seems like it's no longer a secret being kept. Like I'm very curious to see where Clarke goes forward now too, because she kind of has a different mindset now because she's like, I shouldn't have lied. Like I said, I agree with her, but at the same time, I also agree she shouldn't have lied. But like it's because I knew like secrets don't stay buried for long. Eventually, someone was going to find that letter. Like I said at the beginning, it wasn't expecting it to be literally the next episode. So I'm very curious, to see what her mindset is going forward too. Like maybe she'll be a lot more optimistic. Like I said, it's weird. Jasper to me is probably one of the most optimistic people, even though he's accepted his own death. He's like, yeah, but you gotta let everyone else kind of make their own decision on what they want to do with their lives. Essentially, it's like I want to throw away my life. I just want to die, but that doesn't mean I should let everyone else, kind of be the same way. They have to decide for themselves. So, very interesting to see what will go down next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.